The sound of a heavy, brass bell clanging loudly, immediately followed by the distinct sound of a priceless glass shattering. The air in the private dining room on the top floor of the Sterling Group headquarters in Midtown Manhattan was thick, not just with the scent of aged mahogany and expensive Chateaubriand, but with the suffocating weight of unearned judgment. It was the annual Family Success Summit, a gathering less about connection and more about the competitive display of wealth and academic titles. The focus of the room, however, was currently fixated on a young man who possessed neither, Lucas Sterling. The noise that sliced through the polite, low hum of conversation was the grating, insistent voice of Mr. Frederick Sterling, the family patriarch's younger brother, a man whose entire personality was built around his inherited wealth. He was speaking directly to Lucas, his voice amplified by the silence he commanded. "You expect me to believe a half scholarship pays for that tuition, Lucas? Don't insult us. Tell them. Boy, how did you cheat to get a seat at our table?" The confrontational opening was immediate and brutal. The 8-second mark was punctuated by the collective, indrawn breath of the 20 relatives surrounding them. Lucas, a young man of dark complexion, froze instantly, his shoulders hunched slightly over his untouched plate, the movement less a flinch and more an instinctive attempt to reduce his physical footprint, to become invisible. The emotional tension was palpable. The accusation was a clear, public condemnation of his integrity. The injustice was blatant. Lucas hadn't just earned his spot at New York University. He had worked 2 jobs, skipped meals, and sacrificed every non-essential moment to maintain the impossible grades required. His hard work was now reduced to fraud by the single, sweeping, arrogant statement of a man who had never worked a day in his life. Lucas remained silently hurt, his eyes fixed downward on the pristine white tablecloth. He made no sound, offered no immediate defense, refusing to meet the judgmental gazes of the 3 relatives surrounding the large table. An ominous hint of future reversal, faint but powerful, lingered in the quiet way Lucas held himself. His silence wasn't fear, it was a deep, chilling reserve. The quiet, measured pause before he was expected to respond hinted that the question had not actually insulted him, but had instead sealed the fate of the man who asked it. Mr. Sterling, fueled by the silence he had imposed, leaned back in his custom-made leather chair, a portrait of confident, ignorant disdain. "Your mother," he continued, aiming for a deeper cut, "had a respectable job, Lucas, but not enough to cover the fees here. Not even close. And your late father, bless his soul, was merely a janitor. You are genetically predisposed to mediocrity. Boy, we built our success. You," he scoffed, gesturing dismissively, "relied on tricks, loopholes, and pity. You're embarrassing the family name. We are Sterling. We do not beg." Lucas suffered emotionally, the public humiliation, a burning knot in his stomach. He felt the hot pressure of tears behind his eyes, but refused to release them. The disrespect was a physical blow. The discrimination based on his dark complexion, his family's humble background, and his lack of immediate inherited wealth was now open-air public theater. Aunt Caroline, seated directly across from him, gave him a small, pitying frown. A look Lucas found almost as painful as his uncle's scorn. Even as Mr. Sterling continued his verbal assault, demanding that Lucas confess his invented deceit, Lucas found his anchor. He reached out a hand under the table, finding the trembling hand of his younger sister, Sarah. Sarah, only 16, was trying desperately not to cry. Lucas gave her hand a small, comforting squeeze, a nonverbal act of dignity and kindness meant only for her. It was a silent promise. "I may be humiliated publicly, but I will not be broken privately, and I will protect you." This small act cemented his earned right to the eventual reversal. The tirade continued. Mr. Sterling listed every supposed failing Lucas had. His worn shoes, his lack of a European vacation during the last break, the fact he refused to talk about family investments. Each detail was twisted into proof of his deception. The tension was stretched taut. Lucas's cousin, Robert Sterling, a low-status relative within the inner circle because he worked as a high school teacher, decided he couldn't stand the bullying any longer. He was the only one present who understood the actual pressure of earned income. Robert was the first to act, an essential part of the escalation phase. He cleared his throat loudly, not a polite cough, but a forceful noise meant to interrupt the patriarch. "Frederick," Robert said, his voice shaking slightly, Surely that's uncalled for. Lucas is a fine young man. He's worked harder than anyone in this room. Mr. Sterling only smirked and ignored him, pushing the issue further. A teacher defending a supposed cheat. How fitting, Robert. Go back to grading papers. The attempt to intervene had failed, but it had achieved its purpose. The public tension spiked. The exchange drew more eyes. Whispers started circulating. Why is Frederick pushing so hard? Is the boy really a liar? However, at the far end of the long dining hall, adjacent to a priceless, oil-painted cityscape of 19th century New York, a pivotal figure paused. President Hayes, the chief financial officer, CFO, of New York University, a high-status character who was present as a strategic networking guest of the Sterling Group, was deep in conversation with a bank CEO, but the raised, angry tone of Mr. Sterling caught his professional ear. He turned his head, tilting it slightly to listen. President Hayes, a pillar of the New York educational establishment, did not know the family dynamics. He only heard the name Lucas Sterling coupled with the phrase cheating and university. He was a man with a quiet, powerful authority, and his gaze was now fixed on the scene. The wrongdoers, oblivious to the high-status gaze of the CFO, the one man in the room who understood the actual flow of massive capital, continued their petty tirade. The atmosphere had definitively shifted. It was no longer a formal family dinner. It was an undeniable, highly public interrogation, and a silent, powerful judge was now observing proceedings from the periphery. Mr. Sterling felt he was winning. He stood up, towering over the seated Lucas. I'll make a deal with you, boy. I'll pay off your supposed debt. We can't have a Sterling name associated with this sort of scam. If you agree to leave NYU and take a night job at one of my warehouses. He slammed his hand lightly on the table, the arrogance in his voice absolute. A clean slate. If you accept charity, you admit guilt. Lucas, refusing the bait, finally spoke, his voice a low, steady rumble that commanded a brief hush. Sir, he said, using the formal title that sounded like a weapon of respect against disrespect, I have no debt, and I have nothing to admit. The sheer audacity of the refusal infuriated Mr. Sterling. Still lying. Unbelievable. He turned to the other relatives. Look at him. The pride of the destitute. The humiliation intensified. Cousins snickered, hiding their faces behind wine glasses. Aunt Caroline sighed dramatically, shaking her head. The only genuine connections were Sarah's tight grip on Lucas's hand, and the slight, almost imperceptible nod of acknowledgement Robert, the teacher, gave him from across the table. Lucas took a deep breath. His mind flashed back to the previous year. Not to poverty, but to the sleepless nights spent coding, the venture capital pitches, the frantic pace of building his technology startup, Nexus Tech, from a borrowed laptop in his tiny apartment. The business had exploded, not through luck, but through relentless, focused intelligence. He had done all this while maintaining his perfect GPA. The irony was a heavy, bitter cloak. They were judging his current appearance, completely blind to the enormous, powerful infrastructure he had built in the shadows. The tension escalated further as Mr. Sterling, driven by pure malice and the desire to silence any dissent, turned his attention to Robert. And you, Robert, perhaps you need to review your own accounts. Defending a cheat is endorsing his actions. I might need to have a word with the Board of Education about the sort of character your school hires. This was a significant threat, a public warning that his arrogance and privilege extended beyond the dining room. Robert, a man with a family to feed, paled, his intervention silenced not by logic, but by the sheer weight of financial threat. This pause in the defense was the absolute peak of the injustice phase. Lucas saw Robert's defeat and knew he had to stand alone now. He slowly released Sarah's hand, signaling that the time for silent endurance was over. Meanwhile, at the edge of the hall, President Hayes had finished his brief chat. He was now walking slowly toward the commotion, his expression unreadable, his high-status presence an approaching storm that only Lucas could possibly anticipate. Hello, everyone. Before we begin today's video, we want to thank you for your support, love, and kindness. We wouldn't have come this far without you. Subscribing is one of the best ways you can help us. It's quick, free, and allows us to continue to bring you great content. Your support means everything. Let's keep this channel growing collectively. Where are you watching from? Drop your city and country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get back to the story. Mr. Sterling saw the silence he had created and took it as an admission of guilt. He smirked. There you have it. Silence confirms the truth. The poor boy is a liar, a common street cheat trying to climb where he doesn't belong. He prepared his final, crushing line, unaware that the quiet authority of President Hayes was now just 3 feet behind his chair, listening to every syllable. The confrontation was about to reach its irreversible climax. Lucas looked up, not at his uncle, but over his shoulder, a small, knowing glint in his eyes. Mr. Sterling stood over the seated Lucas, basking in the silence he had purchased through intimidation. The poor boy is a liar, a common street cheat trying to climb where he doesn't belong. He'll never be a Sterling. He was just about to deliver the final, crushing line that would demand Lucas's expulsion from the room when a voice, quiet but carrying the weight of institutional authority, cut him off. Mr. Sterling, the voice said. It wasn't loud, but it possessed the kind of gravity that forced every head in the room to turn simultaneously. President Hayes, the university's chief financial officer, stood directly behind Frederick Sterling's chair, his hands clasped behind his back, his posture impeccably neutral. He looked like a statue of quiet judgment. Mr. Sterling spun around, his expression transitioning from smugness to confusion. Hayes, what are you doing here? This is a private family matter. President Hayes did not address the question. He only looked at Lucas, and in a tone that was completely professional yet intensely personal, he delivered the revelation. I believe you owe young Mr. Lucas Sterling an immediate, profound apology, Frederick. The use of the first name was a subtle, powerful indication of familiarity and superiority. The air in the room seemed to solidify. Lucas's sister, Sarah, gasped, squeezing the hand she had just released. President Hayes continued, his gaze sweeping the stunned relatives, locking them into the moment of truth. You see, Frederick, Lucas didn't cheat to get into the university. He earned his way through legitimate, extraordinary entrepreneurial success. His company, Nexus Tech, has been revolutionizing enterprise networking for the last 18 months. As of last week, Mr. Lucas Sterling is no longer a student scraping by on a half scholarship. Hayes paused, letting the words hang like fatal debris. He became the primary, anonymous investor who bailed out our university's entire endowment fund last quarter. He didn't just earn a seat at your table. He can now buy the very chair you're standing on. The revelation of Lucas's hidden skill, authority, and massive financial history was an instant cataclysmic shockwave. The underestimated person was revealed as immensely powerful. The wrongdoers went silent. The collective expression on the faces of the Sterling relatives, a mixture of greed, disbelief, and sudden, sickening recognition, was a victory in itself. Frederick Sterling, the archetype of loud arrogance, was the most severely impacted. His face, which had been crimson with manufactured rage, immediately paled to an ashen gray. His composure, his authority, his very identity as the successful man of the family, it all instantly collapsed. The silence that followed President Hayes' statement was heavier and more absolute than any Frederick Sterling had ever commanded. It was a silence of utter defeat. Frederick Sterling's collapse was physical. He staggered backward, fumbling for his chair, and finally slumped into it, looking small, pathetic, and utterly exposed. He was trapped by his own words, his list of insults now echoing back as testimony to his monumental ignorance and cruelty. The audience witnessed a reversal with a kind of morbid fascination. A high-status cousin, William, quickly turned his back, pretending to be utterly absorbed by the floral arrangement on the wall, desperate to signal he had played no part in the malice. Aunt Caroline, the one who had offered pity, now offered a look of blatant, calculating admiration that was even uglier than her pity had been. The instant karma was the public knowledge that the person Frederick had belittled, harassed, and accused of being a common street cheat was, in fact, his financial superior and the silent savior of the institution he pretended to admire. His position was compromised, his judgment flawed. Frederick could only manage a choked, pathetic whisper, his eyes darting frantically between Lucas and President Hayes. I didn't know. Lucas, I apologize. It was a misunderstanding. The apology was rushed, desperate, and utterly insincere, a performance designed only to save face. But Lucas, standing up slowly, looked down at his uncle with eyes that held no anger, only a chilling disappointment. This silent, non-aggressive moment was a final, devastating blow. Lucas didn't need to yell. The truth had already inflicted the maximum wound. The room was fractured. Some relatives rushed to Mr. Sterling, ostensibly to comfort him, but truly to distance themselves from his toxic failure. Others gravitated toward Lucas, their congratulations thick with opportunistic eagerness. Lucas looked specifically at his uncle Robert, the teacher who had tried to intervene. "Robert," Lucas said, his voice regaining its steady, calm strength. "Your job is safe. In fact, if you ever need new teaching resources, my foundation would be happy to discuss a grant." Robert's relief was immediate and genuine, his eyes welling up with tears of gratitude. This single, quiet act of support repaired the dignity of the one person who deserved it. Lucas then turned back to the room. He didn't gloat. He didn't demand retribution beyond the apology that was already offered. He simply looked at Frederick Sterling, who was still slumped in his chair, head bowed, utterly defeated. "Frederick," Lucas said, using his first name this time, stripping away all pretense of respect. "Your apologies are accepted, but you should know that true success isn't about what you inherit or what titles you hold. It's about what you build in silence. Today, your cruelty exposed itself." Lucas turned away from the table. He had secured his emotional closure. His dignity was absolutely restored, not by his newfound wealth, but by his steadfast, silent refusal to be broken by baseless judgment. He walked over to his sister, Sarah, who had tears of pure, joyous relief streaming down her face. This time, he didn't squeeze her hand. He pulled her into a warm embrace. This family connection was the only reward he truly valued. Sarah cried openly, tears of relief and love. Life improved instantly. Lucas knew he would never again be subject to the arbitrary judgment of this branch of the family. He and Sarah walked toward the exit, their heads held high. As they reached the door, Lucas paused for a deep reflection. He knew that the only reason they had been so cruel was because they were terrified of anyone who succeeded outside there.